Whenever I teach a double knitting class, I like to start people with single yarn double knitting. And I usually round up that section of the class by mentioning that double knitting is a great way to knit glove fingers. So we're going to imagine ourselves here having completed the palm of a glove. And if we wanted to avoid that tedious sort of working on 12 or 13 stitches on 3 or 4 needles, we can set this up into double knitting. So we take the 2 layers and take the appropriate number of stitches for the next finger. And I'm taking 1 from the front needle, 1 from the back, 1 from the front, 1 from the back, until we have all the stitches required for that finger on 1 needle. We'll make this a 12 stitch finger. So there are 6 stitches from the front and 6 stitches from the back fabric. We'll just tuck those needles through there. And now we'll take our working yarn. I like to leave a decent tail because that may come in handy when neatening the areas between the fingers. It won't be perfect without a little manipulation. And now all we have to do to work this in the round is to knit the first stitch and slip the second one with the yarn in front. Knit the third, slip with yarn in front. So it's simply knit one, slip one with yarn in front. The stitches that I'm knitting are all the near layer stitches. And very important, move that yarn forward and slip that last stitch. That's probably the step that gets forgotten. It's sort of that moment of getting to the end of the row and feeling like you're there and forgetting to move that yarn, but it is important. Now, side 2. These stitches here, the first one on the needle, didn't get worked last time, so now we can work it. Be extra gentle at the edges not to distort the stitches. Slip with yarn in front. So the row is the same. If we have an even number of stitches in the finger, both rows are the same. And I'm just going to continue like this for a couple more rounds and then you can see how it looks. And here is our finger, and it is a tube, will be open. And let's take a look at this one. This is one that I knit previously. And you might notice some slight difference at the side, but once it's manipulated and washed and blocked, you won't notice the difference. The one thing I would mention is that the gauge is likely to be bigger, because when you double knit, even with the same yarn and the same needles, as I go from this stitch, I have a spacer. This other stitch, the far stitch, spaces my stitches further apart than usual. So that little bit of yarn that crosses in front of that stitch will get sucked up into the adjacent stitches once that other stitch is not in the way. Single yarn double knitting with the same yarn and needles will have a looser gauge than regular knitting. So for a glove finger, because you really don't want your glove fingers to be floppy and sort of banana-like, I would change down probably 2 needle increments to make a nice firm finger fabric. You might at this point be saying to yourself, well, that's all very fine and dandy if you have a glove finger with an even number of stitches, but it doesn't matter. You can actually work this with an uneven number of stitches. So I'm going to take the next 7 stitches. So that's a front stitch, back, front, but it finishes with a front stitch. So I've got an odd number of stitches there. So with an odd number of stitches, side 1 is going to be knit the near stitch, slip the far one with the yarn in front, knit the near, slip with yarn in front, and end with a worked stitch. The second side will begin with the slipped stitch. Take the yarn to the knit position and knit. So it'll be slip one with yarn in front, knit one, slip one with yarn in front, knit one, and it ends with a slip with yarn in front. And that's all there is to it. So you just have to remember the two different rows. One side begins with a worked stitch and ends with a worked stitch, and the other side begins and ends with a slip stitch. To complete a finger, I would return the stitches to a normal format on 3 or 4 needles, make decreases and conclude the finger as you would normally do.